The relentless rain pounded against the windows of the luxurious Manhattan penthouse, mirroring the turmoil in Sophia Martinez's heart. Her trembling hands clutched a crumpled piece of paper, a marriage certificate that now seemed nothing more than a cruel joke. Sophia's eyes, once filled with hope and love, now brimmed with tears as she stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. How had it come to this? Just months ago, she was living her fairy tale, married to the charming and wealthy business tycoon, Alexander Blackwood. Now, at 28, she felt like her world was crumbling around her. "You don't belong here, Sophia," Alexander's cold voice cut through the silence, each word a dagger to her heart. "It's time you face the truth, you were never meant for this life." Sophia turned to face her husband, her voice barely a whisper. "Alex, please. I love you. We can work through this." Alexander's handsome face twisted into a sneer. "Love? Don't be naive. Our marriage was a mistake, one I intend to rectify immediately." As if on cue, the penthouse door swung open, revealing Alexander's imposing mother, Victoria Blackwood, and their family lawyer, James Thornton. Victoria's eyes gleamed with triumph as she sauntered into the room, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor. Well, Victoria drawled, her gaze raking over Sophia's simple dress with disdain. "If it isn't our little gold digger. I hope you didn't think you'd actually get away with this charade." Sophia's chest tightened, her breaths coming in short gasps. "Mrs. Blackwood, please. I never wanted Alexander's money. I truly love him." Victoria's laughter was like shards of glass. "Oh, darling. Do you really expect us to believe that? A humble waitress from the Bronx, suddenly married to one of New York's most eligible bachelors? Please." James cleared his throat, producing a thick folder. "Mrs. Martinez, I have here the papers for an annulment. Mr. Blackwood is prepared to offer you a generous settlement in exchange for your cooperation and discretion." Sophia's world spun. Annulment? Settlement? This couldn't be happening. She looked to Alexander, desperately searching for any sign of the man she fell in love with. "Alex, please, talk to me. What happened to us?" For a moment, something flickered in Alexander's steel-gray eyes. Regret? Pain? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold determination. "Sign the papers, Sophia. It's over." With trembling legs, Sophia made her way to the door, her heart shattering with each step. As she reached for the handle, Victoria's voice stopped her. "Oh, and Sophia? Do be a dear and leave the wedding ring. It's a family heirloom, after all. We wouldn't want it tarnished by common hands." Sophia's fingers brushed against the ornate ring, a symbol of love and promise, now reduced to a mere trinket. With a shaky breath, she slid it off her finger and placed it on the side table. As the door closed behind her, Sophia could hear Victoria's triumphant laugh and Alexander's muffled words. The sound of her dreams shattering echoed in her ears as she stumbled into the elevator. The rain soaked through Sophia's thin dress as she emerged onto the bustling New York street. Tears mingled with raindrops on her cheeks as she wandered aimlessly, the weight of her shattered world crushing her spirit. Hours later, Sophia found herself in a small, dingy diner in her old neighborhood in the Bronx. The familiar scent of greasy food and strong coffee provided little comfort as she huddled in a corner booth, her wet clothes clinging to her shivering frame. "Sophia? Sophia Martinez, is that you?" A warm, concerned voice broke through her misery. Looking up, Sophia met the kind eyes of Eleanor Ramirez, her former neighbor and confidant. The older woman's face creased with worry as she took in Sophia's bedraggled appearance. "Oh, my dear," Eleanor murmured, sliding into the booth across from her. "What on earth happened to you?" The floodgates opened, and Sophia found herself pouring out the entire sordid tale, her whirlwind romance with Alexander, their secret wedding, and the cruel rejection she had just endured. Eleanor listened patiently, her weathered hand covering Sophia's trembling one. "I was such a fool," Sophia whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "I really thought he loved me." Eleanor's eyes flashed with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "Now you listen to me, Sophia Martinez. You are not a fool. You are a kind, loving woman who saw the best in someone even when they didn't deserve it. That takes courage." Sophia managed a weak smile, grateful for Eleanor's unwavering support. As they talked, the diner's other patrons, many of whom Sophia had known growing up, gathered around, offering words of encouragement and support. Among them was Michael Ramirez, Eleanor's grandson and Sophia's childhood friend. His warm brown eyes filled with concern as he approached the table. "Soph? I just heard. I'm so sorry." Sophia felt a flutter in her chest at the sight of Michael, a feeling she quickly pushed aside. Now was not the time for such thoughts. As the night wore on, Sophia found herself surrounded by the love and support of her old community. It was a stark contrast to the cold, unfeeling world she had just left behind. "You can stay with us for as long as you need," Eleanor insisted as they prepared to leave the diner. "We'll help you get back on your feet." Sophia's eyes welled with fresh tears, this time of gratitude. "Thank you, Eleanor. I don't know what I'd do without you all." As they stepped out into the now quiet street, the rain had finally stopped. A sliver of moonlight peeked through the clouds, casting a soft glow on the wet pavement. "You know," Michael said softly, falling into step beside Sophia, "they say that after the storm comes the rainbow. This might be the end of one chapter, Soph, but it's also the beginning of a new one." Sophia nodded, a tiny spark of hope igniting in her heart. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she was done being a victim. It was time to reclaim her life and show the Blackwoods that Sophia Martinez was not someone to be underestimated. Little did Sophia know that across town, in the opulent Blackwood penthouse, a storm of a different kind was brewing, one that would soon turn her world upside down once again. Alexander Blackwood stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His hand absently toyed with Sophia's discarded wedding ring, a war of emotions raging within him. "Well, that's done," Victoria said smugly, pouring herself a glass of champagne. "I must say, Alexander, you played your part perfectly. That little gold digger won't be bothering us again." Alexander's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. James Thornton cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Blackwood, shall I proceed with filing the annulment papers?" Before Alexander could respond, the penthouse door burst open. Gasping for breath, Alexander's younger sister, Olivia, stumbled in, her face pale with shock. "Alex! Mom! You need to see this." She thrust her tablet forward, a news article displayed on the screen. As Alexander read the headline, his blood ran cold: Blackwood Industries under federal investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Victoria's champagne glass shattered on the floor. "What? This is impossible." But as they scrolled through the article, the horrible truth became clear. Years of financial manipulation, backdoor deals, and outright theft had finally caught up with the Blackwood empire. And at the center of it all was Victoria Blackwood herself. Alexander turned to his mother, his voice dangerously low. "What have you done?" Victoria's composure cracked, her eyes wild with panic. "I did what I had to do to keep this family on top. You have no idea the sacrifices I've made." As the reality of the situation sank in, Alexander's mind raced. In pushing Sophia away, had he just cut ties with the one person who truly cared for him, not his money or status? Across town, In a humble Bronx apartment, Sophia lay awake, unaware that her journey was far from over. The secrets of the past and the trials of the future were about to collide, setting in motion a chain of events that would test her resilience, challenge her heart, and ultimately reveal the true nature of love, loyalty, and redemption. In the coming days, as the Blackwood empire crumbled and long-buried secrets came to light, Sophia would find herself at the center of a storm that threatened to consume everything and everyone in its path. But with the strength of her newfound family and the unexpected alliance of an old love, she would face the challenges head-on, proving that true wealth lies not in money or status, but in the bonds of love and the power of forgiveness. The stage was set for a tale of betrayal, redemption, and unexpected twists of fate. As the first light of dawn broke over the New York skyline, neither Sophia nor Alexander could have imagined the journey that lay ahead, a journey that would test their love, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately reveal the extraordinary strength of the human heart. In the quiet hours of the morning, as Sophia finally drifted off to sleep in Eleanor's spare room, a seed of determination took root in her heart. She may have lost everything she thought she wanted, but in doing so, she had rediscovered something far more valuable, her own worth. Little did she know that across the city, Alexander Blackwood was making a decision that would change both their lives forever. As the weight of his family's deception pressed down upon him, he realized that in pushing Sophia away, he may have lost the one true thing in his life. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he thought he'd never use again. As it rang, his heart pounded in his chest. Would she even answer? And if she did, could he find the words to make things right? The story of Sophia Martinez and Alexander Blackwood was far from over. In fact, it was about to take a turn that neither of them could have anticipated, a turn that would lead them through a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and unexpected alliances. As the sun rose over New York City, casting long shadows across the streets, the stage was set for a tale of redemption, second chances, and the earth-shattering power of true love. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, heartache, and shocking revelations, but it would also offer the promise of a love so profound it could overcome any obstacle. For Sophia and Alexander, the real test was just beginning. In the face of adversity, betrayal, and their own deepest fears, they would discover the true meaning of strength, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of the heart. The city stirred to life, unaware of the drama unfolding within its concrete canyons. But soon, very soon, the story of the humble waitress and the fallen tycoon would captivate the entire nation, proving once and for all that love, when pure and true, can conquer all, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. As Sophia turned in her sleep, a small smile played on her lips. In her dreams, she saw not the glittering lights of Manhattan or the cold luxury of the Blackwood penthouse, but the warm, welcoming faces of her old neighborhood. It was here, among these humble streets, that her true journey would begin, a journey that would lead her to discover strengths she never knew she possessed and a love more powerful than she ever dared to dream. The first rays of sunlight crept through the threadbare curtains of Eleanor's spare room, gently rousing Sophia from her fitful sleep. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Then, like a tidal wave, the memories of the previous night came crashing back. Sophia sat up, her heart heavy with the weight of her shattered dreams. The diamond-studded watch on her wrist, a gift from Alexander on their one-month anniversary, seemed to mock her with its opulence. With trembling fingers, she unclasped it and set it on the nightstand. It was time to let go of the illusions and face reality. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Sophia, dear?" Eleanor's warm voice called out. "Are you awake? I've made some breakfast if you're feeling up to it." Sophia's stomach growled in response, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since before her world fell apart. "Thank you, Eleanor," she replied, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'll be right out." As she made her way to the small kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon enveloped her like a comforting hug. Eleanor stood at the stove, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. The normality of the scene brought a lump to Sophia's throat. "Good morning, sweetheart," Eleanor said, turning to greet her with a sympathetic smile. "How are you holding up?" Sophia managed a weak smile in return. "I've been better," she admitted, sinking into a chair at the small kitchen table. "But I'm grateful to be here. Thank you again for taking me in." Eleanor waved off her thanks, setting a steaming mug of coffee in front of her. "Nonsense. Your family, Sophia. We take care of our own around here." As they ate breakfast, Eleanor filled Sophia in on the neighborhood gossip, carefully avoiding any mention of the Blackwoods or Sophia's situation. It was a small kindness, but one that Sophia appreciated deeply. Just as they were finishing up, Michael burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement and concern. "Soph. Thank God you're okay. I've been trying to reach you all morning." Sophia blinked in surprise. "My phone. I must have left it at the penthouse." "Why? What's wrong?" Michael's eyes widened. "You haven't seen the news? It's all over every channel. The Blackwoods, their company, it's all falling apart." With shaking hands, Michael pulled out his phone and pulled up a news article. Sophia's jaw dropped as she read the headline, "Blackwood Industries' Empire Crumbles, Federal Investigation Reveals Years of Fraud." As Sophia scrolled through the article, her mind reeled. The company was under investigation for massive fraud and embezzlement. Stocks were plummeting. And at the center of it all was Victoria Blackwood, Alexander's mother. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "I had no idea." Michael squeezed her shoulder gently. "There's more, sophomore. They're saying that Alexander might have been involved too." Sophia's heart clenched. Despite everything that had happened, she couldn't believe that Alexander would be capable of such deceit. The man she had fallen in love with, the one who had shown her kindness and passion, surely he couldn't be part of this? As if sensing her turmoil, Eleanor spoke up. Now. Let's not jump to conclusions. The news doesn't always get everything right. What matters is that you're safe, Sophia." Sophia nodded absently, her mind racing. What did this mean for her? For Alexander? And why couldn't she shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye? Across town, in the Blackwood penthouse, chaos reigned. Alexander paced the living room, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "How could you do this?" he shouted at his mother, who sat on the couch, her face ashen. "Years of lying, stealing. Did you ever think about the consequences?" Victoria's lips trembled, but her voice remained defiant. "I did what I had to do to keep this family on top. You have no idea the sacrifices I've made, the deals I've had to strike." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, his mind reeling. "And now? What do we do now, Mother? Our entire empire is crumbling around us." Victoria's eyes flashed with a mixture of desperation and determination. "We fight, Alexander. We've come too far to let it all slip away now." Just then, James Thornton burst into the room, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood, I'm afraid we have another problem. The press is gathering outside, and they're demanding a statement." Alexander strode to the window, peering through the blinds. Sure enough, a sea of reporters and camera crews had assembled on the street below, their excited chatter audible even from this height. "We need to get ahead of this," James advised, his voice tense. "If we don't control the narrative, they'll crucify us in the media." Victoria stood, smoothing her designer dress with trembling hands. "Alexander, you need to make a statement." Deny everything. We'll say it's a witch hunt, a conspiracy to bring down the Blackwood name. For a moment, Alexander was tempted. It would be so easy to fall back on the family's wealth and influence, to bury the truth under a mountain of legal battles and PR spin. But as he opened his mouth to agree, an image flashed in his mind, Sophia's face, filled with hurt and betrayal as he cast her aside. In that instant, Alexander made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "No more lies, Mother. It's time we face the truth." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "Have you lost your mind? This isn't just about you, Alexander. Think of your sister, your cousins, everyone who depends on the Blackwood name." But Alexander stood his ground. "And what about all the people we've hurt? The lives we've ruined with our greed? It has to stop somewhere, and it stops with me." Before Victoria could protest further, Alexander strode out of the penthouse, ignoring James's frantic calls and his mother's shrill objections. As the elevator descended, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The moment he stepped outside, he was engulfed in a storm of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Raising his hands for silence, Alexander addressed the crowd, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today not as the CEO of Blackwood Industries, but as a man who has made grave mistakes. The allegations against our company are true. For years, we have engaged in fraudulent practices, manipulating the market and betraying the trust of our investors and employees." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a frenzy of questions. Alexander held up his hand once more. "I take full responsibility for my part in these crimes. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO and will be cooperating fully with the federal investigation. To those we have wronged, I offer my deepest apologies. It is my hope that by coming clean now, we can begin to make amends for the damage we have caused." As Alexander finished speaking, a hush fell over the assembled reporters. Then, as if a dam had broken, they surged forward, each clamoring to be heard. But Alexander had said his piece. With a heavy heart, he pushed through the crowd and hailed a taxi, leaving behind the only world he had ever known. As the taxi wove through the busy New York streets, Alexander's mind raced. He had given up everything, his wealth, his status, his family's legacy. But strangely, he felt lighter than he had in years. For the first time in his life, he was free from the web of lies and deceit that had ensnared him since childhood. There was only one thing left to do, one person he needed to see. With a trembling hand, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never dared to use. Meanwhile, back in the Bronx, Sophia sat in stunned silence, her eyes glued to the small TV in Eleanor's living room. She had just watched Alexander's press conference, her heart pounding as she listened to his confession. "I can't believe it," she whispered, more to herself than to Michael and Eleanor, who sat on either side of her. "He actually told the truth." Michael squeezed her hand gently. "It doesn't change what he did to you, sophomore. He still threw you away when things got tough." Sophia nodded, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that there might be more to the story. The man she had just seen on TV, owning up to his mistakes and facing the consequences, was the Alexander she had fallen in love with, not the cold, cruel man who had rejected her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the shrill ring of Eleanor's landline. The older woman answered, her brow furrowing as she listened to the caller. "Sophia, dear," Eleanor said, holding out the receiver. "It's for you. He says his name is Alexander Blackwood." Sophia's heart leapt into her throat. With shaking hands, she took the phone, acutely aware of Michael and Eleanor's concerned gazes. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sophia," Alexander's voice came through, filled with a mixture of relief and trepidation. I know I have no right to call you after what I did. But please, I need to see you. There's so much I need to explain. Sophia closed her eyes, torn between the desire to hang up and the undeniable pull she still felt towards him. I don't know, Alexander. You hurt me. You let your mother humiliate me and threw me out like I was nothing. I know, Alexander replied, his voice cracking. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Sophia, there's so much you don't know. Please, give me a chance to explain. After that, if you never want to see me again, I'll understand. Sophia took a deep breath, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect herself from further heartbreak. But another part, the part that still believed in the goodness she had seen in Alexander, urged her to listen. All right, she said finally. Where do you want to meet? They agreed on a small coffee shop in a neutral part of town. As Sophia hung up, she turned to face Michael and Eleanor, bracing herself for their reactions. To her surprise, it was Eleanor who spoke first. You should go, dear. Whatever happens, at least you'll have answers. And closure, if that's what you need. Michael looked like he wanted to object, but he held his tongue. Just be careful, okay? And call us if you need anything. I mean it, sophomore. Anything at all. Sophia nodded, grateful for their support. As she got ready to leave, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Gone was the glittering socialite wife of a billionaire. In her place stood a woman who had been knocked down but refused to stay there. Whatever Alexander had to say, she would face it with strength and dignity. The coffee shop was quiet when Sophia arrived, just a few patrons scattered among the tables. She spotted Alexander immediately, hunched over a cup of coffee in a corner booth. He looked nothing like the polished businessman she had known. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. As she approached, Alexander looked up, his eyes widening. Sophia, he breathed, standing quickly. You came. Thank you. Sophia slid into the booth across from him, her heart pounding. I'm here, Alexander. Now talk. Alexander took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly around his coffee cup. First, I need to apologize. What I did to you was unforgivable. I let my mother's prejudices and my own cowardice drive away the best thing that ever happened to me. Sophia remained silent, her face impassive. Alexander continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. The truth is, Sophia, I was trapped. My mother, she's been controlling every aspect of my life since I was a child. The company, my relationships, everything. When I met you, for the first time, I felt free. Happy. But it terrified her. So you just gave in? Sophia asked, her voice tight with hurt. You let her dictate our future? Alexander shook his head, his eyes filled with regret. I thought I was protecting you. My mother, she's capable of terrible things, Sophia. I was afraid of what she might do if I defied her. As Alexander spoke, he revealed a tale of manipulation and control that made Sophia's head spin. Victoria Blackwood, it seemed, had been the puppet master behind the family's rise to power, using her children as pawns in her grand scheme. When I married you in secret, it was the first time I'd ever truly defied her, Alexander explained. But she found out, and she threatened to destroy you, Sophia. Your family, your friends, everything you cared about. I thought by pushing you away, I was keeping you safe. Sophia sat back, stunned by the revelation. But now? What changed? Alexander's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of pain and determination. I realized that by trying to protect you, I was becoming everything I hated. When the truth about the company came out, I knew I couldn't live with the lies anymore. That's why I confessed, why I'm cooperating with the investigation. I want to make things right, Sophia. Starting with you. As Sophia processed Alexander's words, a commotion near the front of the cafe caught their attention. A group of reporters had gathered outside, cameras flashing as they peered through the windows. "We should go," Alexander said, his voice tight with tension. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I never meant to drag you into this circus." Sophia nodded, her mind reeling from everything she had learned. As they slipped out the back entrance, avoiding the press, she found herself at a crossroads. Could she forgive Alexander for the pain he had caused? And even if she could, what future could they possibly have now that his entire world was crumbling? They walked in silence for a few blocks, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Sophia spoke. "I need time, Alexander. To process all of this, to figure out what it means for me, for us." Alexander nodded, his eyes filled with understanding and a glimmer of hope. "Of course. Take all the time you need, Sophia. I'll be here, ready to face whatever comes next. Together, if you'll have me." As they parted ways, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. Anger at the pain she had endured, sympathy for the impossible situation Alexander had faced, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of the love that had brought them together in the first place. Little did Sophia know that her journey was far from over. As she made her way back to Eleanor's apartment, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. Well, Victoria Blackwood's cold voice sent a chill down Sophia's spine. If it isn't the little gold digger who started all this trouble. Sophia straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. "Mrs. Blackwood, I have nothing to say to you." Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "Oh, but I have plenty to say to you, my dear. You see, you've cost me everything. My son, my company, my reputation. And I intend to make you pay." Before Sophia could react, two burly men appeared on either side of her. As one clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling her scream, the other pressed a sweet-smelling cloth to her face. The world began to spin, and as darkness closed in, Sophia's last thought was of Alexander. Across town, blissfully unaware of the danger Sophia was in, Alexander sat in his hotel room, staring at his phone. He wanted desperately to call her, to make sure she was okay after their emotional meeting. But he had promised to give her space, and he intended to keep that promise. A sharp knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Warily, he approached, peering through the peephole. His heart sank as he recognized the stern face of Detective Sarah Thompson, the lead investigator in the Blackwood Industries case. "Mr. Blackwood," Detective Thompson said as Alexander opened the door. "I'm afraid we need to ask you a few more questions. May we come in?" Alexander nodded, stepping aside to let the detective and her partner enter. As he closed the door behind them, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Meanwhile, in a dark, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Sophia slowly regained consciousness. Her head throbbed, and as she tried to move, she realized with a jolt of fear that her hands and feet were bound. "Ah, Sleeping Beauty awakes," Victoria's mocking voice came from somewhere in the shadows. "I do hope you're comfortable, my dear. We have so much to discuss." As Victoria stepped into the dim light, Sophia's blood ran cold. The elegant socialite was gone, replaced by a woman whose eyes burned with a frightening intensity. "What do you want from me?" Sophia demanded, struggling against her bonds. Victoria's laugh was hollow, devoid of any warmth. "Want? Oh, my dear, it's not about what I want anymore. It's about what you're going to do for me. As Victoria outlined her chilling plan, Sophia realized with growing horror that her nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Back at the hotel, Alexander paced the room, his mind racing as he answered Detective Thompson's questions. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. As he glanced at the screen, his face drained of color. "Mr. Blackwood?" Detective Thompson asked, noticing his sudden change in demeanor. "Is everything all right?" With shaking hands, Alexander held out his phone, revealing a photo of Sophia, bound and terrified, with a simple message beneath: "The game isn't over yet, darling. Mother knows best." In that moment, as the gravity of the situation sank in, Alexander knew that the next few hours would determine not just his future, but Sophia's very survival. The woman he loved was in danger, and it was all his fault. "Detective," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination, "I need your help. The woman I love has been kidnapped, and I think I know who's behind it." Detective Thompson's eyes narrowed as she studied the photo. "Mr. Blackwood, are you saying your mother is involved in this?" Alexander nodded grimly. "Yes, and I'm afraid she's capable of far worse than we ever imagined. We need to find Sophia before it's too late." As the detective sprang into action, calling for backup and issuing an APB, Alexander closed his eyes, silently praying for Sophia's safety. He had already failed her once, he couldn't bear the thought of failing her again. In the warehouse, Sophia's mind raced, searching for a way out of her predicament. Victoria paced before her, ranting about her lost empire and the revenge she sought. "You'll call Alexander," Victoria instructed, her voice cold and calculated. "You'll tell him to recant his confession, to claim it was all a misunderstanding. In exchange for your safety, he'll take full responsibility for the company's misdeeds." Sophia's eyes flashed with defiance. "And if I refuse?" Victoria's smile was chilling. "My dear, I don't think you understand. Refusal is not an option." As if to emphasize her point, one of Victoria's henchmen stepped forward, brandishing a wicked-looking knife. Sophia swallowed hard, fear battling with determination in her heart. Across the city, a frantic search was underway. Alexander, working alongside Detective Thompson and her team, combed through years of Blackwood family history, searching for any clue that might lead them to Sophia. "Wait," Alexander said suddenly, his eyes widening as a memory surfaced. "The old Blackwood shipping warehouse. It's been abandoned for years, but my mother always refused to sell it. She said it held sentimental value." Detective Thompson nodded sharply. "It's worth checking out. Let's move." As they raced through the city streets, sirens blaring, Alexander's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and hope. Would they be in time? And even if they were, could he ever make amends for the danger he had brought into Sophia's life? Back at the warehouse, Victoria held out a phone to Sophia, her eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "It's time, my dear. Make the call. And remember, one wrong word, and your precious Alexander will find nothing but your corpse." Sophia's mind raced, searching for a way out. As her fingers hovered over the phone's keypad, a plan began to form. It was risky, but it was all she had. With a trembling hand, she dialed Alexander's number, praying that he would understand her hidden message. Meanwhile, Alexander sat in the passenger seat of Detective Thompson's cruiser, his heart pounding as they sped towards the old Blackwood shipping warehouse. The silence was shattered by the shrill ring of his cell phone. "It's Sophia," he gasped, showing the screen to Detective Thompson. The detective nodded grimly. "Answer it. Keep her talking as long as you can. We'll trace the call." Alexander took a deep breath and answered. "Sophia? Are you all right?" Sophia's voice came through, shaky but determined. "Alexander, listen carefully. Your mother wants me to tell you to recant your confession. She says you need to take full responsibility for everything." Alexander's brow furrowed, sensing there was more to her words. "I understand, Sophia. Tell me what she wants me to do." As Sophia spoke, she wove a careful tapestry of words, dropping subtle hints about her location and situation. "She wants you to meet her at the place where it all began, Alexander. Where the Blackwood legacy was born. You know, where we had our first date. By the water?" Alexander's eyes widened as he caught on. Their first date hadn't been anywhere near water. Sophia was confirming they were at the old shipping warehouse. "I understand," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his heart. "Tell her I'm on my way. And Sophia? Stay strong. I love you." As the call ended, Detective Thompson nodded to her partner. "We've got a location. It's the warehouse. All units, converge on Blackwood Shipping, Pier 17. Back in the warehouse, Victoria snatched the phone from Sophia's hand, her face twisted with triumph. "Well done, my dear. Perhaps you're not as useless as I thought." Sophia held her head high, refusing to show fear. "It's over, Victoria. Whatever happens now, you've lost. The truth is out, and no amount of scheming can change that." Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "You naive little fool. Do you really think this ends with Alexander's confession? The Blackwood Empire was built on secrets far darker than you could imagine. And I intend to keep those secrets buried, no matter the cost." As Victoria ranted, Sophia's eyes darted around the warehouse, searching for anything that might aid her escape. Her gaze fell on a rusty chain hanging nearby, just within reach if she could maneuver her chair a few inches to the left. Outside, sirens wailed as a fleet of police cars descended on the warehouse district. Alexander jumped out of the car before it had fully stopped, his heart in his throat. "Wait!" Detective Thompson called, grabbing his arm. "We do this by the book, Mr. Blackwood. Your mother is dangerous and possibly armed. Let us handle this." Alexander nodded reluctantly, knowing she was right but hating every second of inaction. As the police formed a perimeter around the warehouse, he closed his eyes, silently willing Sophia to hold on just a little longer. Inside, Victoria paced like a caged tiger, her composure cracking as the sound of sirens grew closer. "No, no, no," she snarled, rounding on Sophia. "What did you do? How did they find us?" Sophia met her gaze steadily, a small smile playing on her lips. "You underestimated me, Victoria. Just like you underestimated Alexander's capacity for change. It's over." With a cry of rage, Victoria lunged forward, her manicured hands closing around Sophia's throat. As she struggled for breath, Sophia summoned every ounce of strength she had left. With a mighty effort, she threw her weight to the side, toppling her chair. As she fell, her bound hands brushed against the rusty chain. Ignoring the pain as the metal bit into her skin, Sophia grasped it tightly, using it to swat the ropes binding her wrists. Victoria, caught off guard by Sophia's sudden movement, stumbled backward. "Stop her!" she shrieked at her henchmen, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing unease. But before they could react, the warehouse doors burst open. "Police! Freeze!" Detective Thompson's voice rang out, accompanied by the sound of dozens of weapons being cocked. In the chaos that ensued, Sophia managed to free herself from her bonds. As Victoria's henchmen raised their hands in surrender, the Blackwood matriarch made a desperate dash for a side exit. "Stop!" Sophia cried, spotting a gun that had fallen from one of the henchmen's hands. Without thinking, she scooped it up and aimed it at Victoria's retreating form. Victoria froze, slowly turning to face Sophia with a sneer. You don't have it in you, you little street rat. You're weak, just like my son. Sophia's hand trembled, but her voice was steady. You're wrong, Victoria. Compassion isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength there is. Something you never understood. As the police closed in, Victoria's face contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. With a feral cry, she reached into her jacket, pulling out a small pistol. Time seemed to slow down. Sophia saw Victoria's finger tightening on the trigger. She heard shouts from the police, telling Victoria to drop her weapon. And then, cutting through it all, she heard Alexander's voice, filled with terror, Sophia. In that moment, as Victoria's gun swung towards her, Sophia made a split-second decision. She squeezed the trigger of her own weapon, the sound of the shot echoing through the warehouse. Victoria stumbled backward, a look of shock on her face as a red stain blossomed on her expensive blouse. As she fell, her own gun clattered harmlessly to the ground. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Police swarmed the warehouse, securing the scene and apprehending Victoria's henchmen. Paramedics rushed to attend to the wounded Blackwood matriarch, who lay unconscious but alive. And then, cutting through the chaos, Alexander was there, gathering Sophia into his arms. Sophia, oh God, Sophia, he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. I thought I'd lost you. Sophia clung to him, her body shaking with delayed shock and relief. Alexander, she whispered, burying her face in his chest. It's over. It's really over. As the adrenaline of the moment faded, the full weight of what had transpired began to sink in. Sophia had shot someone, her actions, while in self-defense, had nearly killed another human being. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she sagged against Alexander, overwhelmed. Sensing her distress, Alexander tightened his embrace. It's okay, he murmured, stroking her hair. You're safe now. I've got you, and I'm never letting you go again. Detective Thompson approached, her face a mixture of concern and admiration. Ms. Martinez, I know this is difficult, but we'll need to take your statement. You acted in self-defense, protecting not just yourself but potentially others as well. You're very brave. Sophia nodded numbly, allowing Alexander to support her as they made their way out of the warehouse. As they stepped into the sunlight, a crowd of reporters had gathered, held back by a police cordon. Camera flashes popped like lightning, and a barrage of questions assaulted them. Mr. Blackwood, is it true your mother was behind the kidnapping? Ms. Martinez, how does it feel to be a hero? Alexander, will you be reinstated as CEO now that the truth is out? Alexander shielded Sophia from the worst of the commotion, guiding her towards a waiting ambulance. As paramedics began to check her for injuries, he turned to face the press, his expression resolute. I will be making a full statement later, he announced, his voice carrying over the clamor. For now, know this, Sophia Martinez is the bravest, most compassionate person I have ever known. She is the true hero of the story, and I am humbled to stand by her side. With that, he turned his back on the reporters, focusing entirely on Sophia. As the ambulance doors closed behind them, shutting out the chaos of the outside world, Sophia finally allowed herself to break down, sobbing into Alexander's shoulder. Shoo, it's okay, he murmured, holding her close. You're safe now. We're safe. As the ambulance wound its way through the city streets, Sophia's sobs gradually subsided. She looked up at Alexander, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. What happens now? She asked softly. Alexander took her hand, squeezing it gently. Now, we heal. Together. If you'll have me, that is. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Sophia, but I promise you, I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to make amends for the pain I've caused you." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, searching Alexander's face. She saw remorse there, yes, but also love, pure, unselfish love that had given him the courage to stand up to his mother and face the consequences of his family's actions. "I don't know what the future holds, Alexander," she said finally. "But I do know that I want to face it with you. We've both made mistakes, we've both been hurt. But we've also both grown. Maybe we can build something new, something stronger, from the ashes of what we've been through." Alexander's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "I love you, Sophia Martinez. With all my heart and soul, I love you." Sophia smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "I love you too, Alexander Blackwood. Despite everything, I never stopped." As the ambulance pulled up to the hospital, they shared a tender kiss, not a fairy tale ending, but a promise of a new beginning, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the strength of true love. In the days and weeks that followed, Sophia and Alexander faced the aftermath of their ordeal together. There were police interviews to endure, reporters to dodge, and a mountain of legal proceedings as the full extent of Blackwood Industries' corrupt practices came to light. Victoria Blackwood, who survived her injury, was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. As she awaited trial, more and more of her victims came forward, painting a picture of decades of manipulation and deceit. Alexander, true to his word, cooperated fully with the authorities. He used his insider knowledge to help prosecutors build an airtight case against not just his mother, but all those who had profited from Blackwood Industries' illegal activities. The process was painful, forcing Alexander to confront the ugly truths about his family's legacy. But with Sophia by his side, he found the strength to push through, determined to make amends for the harm his family had caused. As for Sophia, she emerged from the ordeal as an unlikely hero. Her quick thinking and bravery had not only saved her own life but had been instrumental in bringing down a corrupt empire. She received offers for book deals and TV interviews, all of which she politely declined. Her focus was on healing, both herself and her relationship with Alexander. One sunny afternoon, several months after the warehouse incident, Sophia and Alexander stood hand in hand on the steps of the courthouse. The verdict in Victoria's trial had just been announced, guilty on all counts, with a sentence that ensured she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. As they faced the sea of reporters, Alexander squeezed Sophia's hand, drawing strength from her presence. "Today, justice has been served," he began, his voice steady. "But this is not an ending. It's a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to make things right." He turned to Sophia, his eyes shining with love and admiration. "With the help of this incredible woman, I pledge to use whatever resources I have left to compensate those who were harmed by Blackwood Industries' actions. We will work tirelessly to restore trust and to prove that it's never too late to choose integrity over greed, love over power." Sophia stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "We've been through hell, but we've come out stronger. Our story is proof that love can triumph over adversity, that second chances are possible, and that it's never too late to do the right thing." As the crowd of reporters erupted with questions, Alexander and Sophia turned away, walking hand in hand down the courthouse steps. They had a long road ahead of them, full of challenges and uncertainties. But they would face it together, their love tempered by adversity and strengthened by shared purpose. That evening, as the sun set over the New York skyline, Sophia and Alexander stood on the balcony of their modest new apartment. It was a far cry from the luxurious penthouse they had once shared, but to them, it was perfect. "You know," Sophia said, leaning into Alexander's embrace, "when I was a little girl dreaming of my Prince Charming, I never imagined it would turn out quite like this." Alexander chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. No fairy tale could compete with our story, my love. We've faced dragons, conquered evil queens, and come out stronger for it. Sophia turned in his arms, looking up into his eyes. So, what's our happily ever after, Alexander Blackwood? He smiled, cupping her face gently. Our happily ever after is whatever we make it, Sophia Martinez. As long as we're together, facing each day with love and integrity, that's all the happy ending I need. As their lips met in a tender kiss, the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of gold and pink. It wasn't a perfect ending, there would still be challenges to face, wounds to heal, and trust to rebuild. But it was their ending, hard-won and all the more precious for the trials they had endured. In the end, the story of Sophia Martinez and Alexander Blackwood wasn't just about a poor woman and a wealthy man. It was a tale of redemption, of the transformative power of love, and of the strength that comes from facing adversity together. It was proof that sometimes, the most beautiful love stories are born not from fairy tale perfection, but from the messy, complicated reality of two imperfect people choosing each other, day after day. As night fell over the city, Sophia and Alexander stood together, silhouetted against the twinkling lights of New York. They had lost an empire of wealth and power, but they had gained something far more valuable, a love built on honesty, forgiveness, and the unshakable knowledge that together, they could weather any storm. And so, dear reader, we leave our unlikely lovers here, not at the end of their story, but at the beginning of a new chapter. For in life, as in love, the most beautiful adventures are those that unfold one day at a time, written not in the stars, but in the choices we make and the love we choose to nurture. As Sophia and Alexander turned from the balcony, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future might hold, they knew one thing for certain: their greatest adventure was just beginning.